Now, Chapter 5 is very different than the other chapters before it, but it's incredibly important. Chapter 5, we're going to discuss things like leadership and social identity. Now, social identity is how you conceive of who you are and how others conceive of who you are. Identity-related obstacles to leader development, organizational cost of overlooking identity, which is terribly costly, incorporating social identity in leader development, and then what are the implications for leader development in organizations. So I want to start with this quote: the leader development is not something that unfolds in the same way for everyone everywhere. It is going to be different depending on who you are and what your experiences have been. You're going to bring that to the table. Leadership and social identity include things like, and this is not an entire list, but things like nationality and race and gender, language, religion, generation. Who you are, how you define yourself is what we're talking about when we're talking about social identity, and it's going to be critically important that you understand this. Now, there are 3 stages of leadership, which include the novice stage, the intermediate stage, and the expert leader stage. In the novice stage, you want to be a leader. Show me, hey, I'm a leader. I mean, you're going to, look at me, guys. I'm the leader. I'm in charge. And novice stage is kind of like, almost like a yellow belt or green belt in karate. They know enough just to be dangerous, but not enough to be really good at it. In the intermediate stage, you start to see the links between different units and subunits within the organization and just how difficult leadership is. In the expert stage, you're not really looking at you, you're trying to develop everybody else, and you're focused on the whole organization and growth and for the right reasons. Kind of like a black belt, when somebody has a black belt, they're at first when they're in yellow and green and blue belt, maybe they're thinking like, yeah, I could stop anybody. I'll hurt them in the process. By the time they get to a black belt, they're thinking, how do I stop this person doing the least damage possible? It's just a mind shift. In graduate school, maybe the mind shift is going from how do I write 20 pages to, oh no, I'm only limited to 20 pages. When you cross that kind of threshold, it's the same kind of experience. Okay, so identity-related obstacles to leader development include things like prejudice. Now, there's a difference between prejudice and discrimination and stereotyping. Stereotyping, let's start here first, is simply lumping in individuals into a group identity. So this particular group has these 5 characteristics, and you're an individual member of that group, so you must have those 5 characteristics. Prejudice is an attitude. Okay, it's an attitude. It may be good or it may be bad, but you're prejudging something, and often we see it with the negative connotations. But discrimination is when you actually take active steps toward doing something. It's an overt action. This prejudice is in your head. Discrimination is an act. Okay, that's kind of the difference between these things. Now, there could be differential opportunities. An example of a differential opportunity is something like we know that a lot of a business transacts in an informal setting. So let's say you're a female, and the glass ceiling, the metaphorical glass ceiling that people talk about, is not necessarily that we don't do business with you, but it may be experienced because, say, you're not a golfer and everybody else are males who like to go golfing, and so they go golfing, you're excluded, or they go on a hunting or fishing trip or something along those lines. You are excluded because you're not involved in those kinds of activities, but a lot of business gets done on the golf course, and so it's not the same level of opportunities. Organizational culture may also play a part of it, and maybe there's a preference for working with males, or I've seen an organization that was exactly the opposite. The preference, all the opportunities went to females. This was an organization in education, by the way, and so all the leading opportunities went to female teachers within that institution, and it had just always been that way in that particular institution. Organizational cost of overlooking identity may be steep. So identity may be the most important aspect of leadership development, in the sense that who you are is fundamental to how you function, and if you neglect that, you can really create a problem. So if you ignore social identity, you can lose human capital, identity capital, diversity capital, social capital, just because you're ignoring this aspect of social identity. Can't ignore who somebody sees themselves as at the fundamental root level. Incorporating social identity in the leadership development, of course, we're going to go back to ACS, the assessment, challenge, and support, and look through that lens. Leaders must understand the impact of this social identity on how others relate to them. Now, this is important. The impact of how this social identity on how others relate to them. And there's two prongs to that. The first side is that people in your organization look at you. So they look at me. I'm a white male. So somebody who's white male may think nothing of it. Somebody who's female may think, well, he's a male, he's going to think X, Y, and Z. Somebody who's an African American or Hispanic or Asian is going to have still yet other filters from which they're going to relate their experience of what white males mean, and they're going to view me through that lens. Now, it works the other way around. I and them doing the same thing the other direction, right? So if to ignore social identity is going to be a critical problem if we're not aware that this is going on, and try to, one, do things to uproot problems associated with it, but understand that that's the way it works. Human beings are simply not, like the classical economists would say, rational. They're not just calculating, rational kind of, they're just emotional. If you ever met somebody and you didn't like them just because they reminded you of someone, you understand that you're not rational, and human beings are just not rational. Okay, so there's challenges. So leaders may realize that the way others perceive them, and this is the way we were just talking about, others perceive them is influenced by their social identity. And again, if you're a leader, you better understand that others are perceiving you through that filter, and you're perceiving them through that filter. Now, how does this play out? So, for example, Douglas, 2003, found that African Americans report a much higher rate than whites of challenges that teach them that race matters. Of course, this is kind of an obvious thing, because African Americans experience a difference in race, or let me put it like this: any minority group is going to experience it's going to be far more salient to them than it is for the majority. The majority doesn't think about it, and this is across cultures. Okay, so if you go to another country, if you're in Japan, or let's say you are a white Caucasian American male in Japan, you're going to experience that in the same way that a minority in any other country experiences, right? You're going to be kind of on the outside looking in, so you need to be sensitive to that. There are people in that position, and you need to be able to deal with them as they are, where they are. Now, they talked about the Identity Explorer only briefly, and so I contacted CCL and asked them, what book do I look to for the the information about the Identity Explorer, because it's really a way of mapping your identities. And so I looked at the appropriate book, and this is what it looks like. So you have these three circles: your given, your chosen, and your core identity. And now it says, in the outer ring, write words that describe your given identity. And those are things like that you're female, you're only child, you're 48, you're tall, you're blind, you're African American, cancer patient, widow, whatever those are. These are things that you had no choice about. Okay. Now, in the next ring, list aspects of your chosen identity. And your chosen identity means things like your occupation, hobbies, political affiliation, where you live, family roles, maybe even your religion. It depends on how you define that. And then, finally, in the center, you write your core attributes. These are traits and behaviors about who you are, what you really value, your beliefs, your values, your skills, things that make you unique as an individual. Now, when you take that and you map this, you're going to see that there are certain things. And given, so this person, say, a white American daughter, and she's tall, and she's 42. Chosen, she's a CEO, and she's a friend, and she's employed and educated. And then in their core, my core fundamental belief is I am a responsible person, or I am introverted, or I'm creative, right? And so those are the kinds of identities and the way that you map this. Now, it goes on. In the center, so what you want to do is you want to underline items that are important to you personally. Then you put a plus sign beside items that you believe contribute to your ability to lead effectively in your organization. You put a minus sign belong items that you believe may detract from your ability to lead effectively, and then a question mark beside items that may vary in how they affect your leadership ability. So what would this look like? Maybe a plus is next to, plus is next to maybe being an American, CEO, and a researcher, and creative. A minus may be next to, and this is just hypothetical, it could change for everybody, next to 42, maybe that doesn't help somehow, and introverted. Maybe being introverted gets in the way in some cases. Maybe being extroverted would get in the way, like if you're an accountant. And then the question marks, I don't know if white is necessarily good or bad. It could be depending on the context. North Carolinian, maybe somebody will judge my accent, or maybe they'll think I'm friendly. Or being female, does that work for me or against me? And then so you make these connections, and you look at things like when you look at the underlined items in your map, what trends do you see? When you look at the items with pluses, minuses, and question marks, what trends do you see? Of the aspects of pluses and minuses and question marks, what are the things that you have in common with other people in the organization? So if you take this and you look at, you do this, say, across your department or across your organization, you might see some very interesting kinds of trends. Okay, so here you would look at all these and see what kind of trends you have with the underlines, the pluses, the minuses, and the question marks. And you'd ask other questions like, what aspects of your identity help you make connections with people at work? Are there aspects of your identity that help, that you keep hidden at work? And what impact does that have on those around you? How might you reveal or emphasize particular elements of your identity? Or how might you hide or de-emphasize particular elements of your identity? So that's the exercise of Identity Explorer. Okay, let's move along. Support. You need support in social identity. That is practical and emotional support. So there's role modeling. So for example, one of the reasons that CEOs, for example, have there's so few female or minority CEOs is that there's not really emotional and practical role modeling support. There's not very many minorities. Now, there are other reasons for that as well, and we talk about this at length in Managing with Excellence and Integrity, Business 610. But there are other reasons beyond that. Discrimination may very well play a part of it, and there are multiple other reasons. Like, for example, as a female, for example, many make different career choices, but that's not all. There's also a dearth of female CEOs to be a practical and emotional support as a role model. Okay, creating an emotionally safe environment, that's an important thing around whatever your identity is. Coaching and mentoring are also important. So what are the implications for leader development practices and organizations? Well, first you want to acknowledge the importance of social identity in leader development. Again, if you somehow discount the core of who you claim to be, not claim to be, I don't mean it in the sense of like, well, you just claim that. I mean, you really believe down deep, this is who I am. And if you diminish that acknowledgement of that person, you're going to do some significant damage and not be able to really get that person to grow like they need to. Renewing and restructuring systemic influences and fostering an inclusive organizational culture. So, all social identities can be validated to the degree that your culture will allow. Okay, thank you for your time and effort with this. We're also going to go slightly out of sequence here, and that is that I'm going to import Chapter 13 next, because Chapter 13 and Chapter 5 really mesh well together, and then we'll be right back on track with the other chapters. Thanks for your time.